You know, like there's physical slavery, there's mental slavery. The sad thing about mental slavery is that it's done to everybody on an everyday basis without them even knowing. And I mean, this could sound quite controversial in me saying it, but I'm gonna say it anyway. For me, the terminology nigger now isn't a race anymore, it's a class. And to be honest, like, what a lot of people don't know is that there was actually more white slaves than black slaves in America during slavery times. It was like the Irish got it pretty bad too, but that got ignored and stepped over unless you speak to an Irish person and they'll tell you. But like I said, one of the things in terms of mental health that I believe helps it in a sense is mental freedom, because once you're free to be, then you're free to fix. You know, instead of having your mind constrained and literally controlled in a certain degree through various chemicals and all these different experimental things. You know, like I said, none of these things were actually cures for mental illnesses that I saw given to Shereen. They weren't cures, they were sustainers to a certain degree. They were things to keep things on a level, you know what I mean? And even through reading some of her medications, they didn't even cure anything, to be honest. One of them actually got rid of the manics but made the lows worse, and this is what was being given to her, and I really found that disturbing. So hold on, it gets rid of the manics but it makes the lows worse. That doesn't sound like a cure to me at all. You know, for me it just sounds like a plaster, and not even a good plaster at that. You know, it sounds like a wet plaster to me. You know, and in general, mental slavery is exercised on a daily basis, but it's even worse for somebody with a mental health condition, because not only do they have to deal with the everyday mental slavery that people are subjugated to, but then they actually have to deal with it from a deeper level within the system and not actually having their voice heard. And you know, like I said, if that's what they believe is a help or a cure for some sort of mental health, no, it really isn't. You know, it comes from, in a certain degree, being free to be. You know, everyone is different. If you know you don't understand something, that's what I'm saying, society fears what it doesn't understand. That is one of the truest sayings I've ever heard, because it's like, for instance, a lot of things that I used to be scared of as a child, I'm not scared of anymore once I actually took time to understand it. And up till now, I don't feel that mental health is understood, because no one can really get inside of somebody's head with a mental health condition unless you've actually been there yourself. And to be honest, there's not many peer support workers like that out there. Most people are somebody that's gone to uni, you know, listen to a whole ton of lectures on what somebody's theory is on it, but there's a difference between theory and practicality. And you know, that's, you know, it's a weird one in that aspect. But yeah, like I said, I believe mental slavery is exercised on a daily basis. I find my mental freedom through meditation. You know, I take time every now and then to literally disconnect from everything and just try and be at one with myself, and that's what helps keep me grounded. But not everybody, I'm not saying that not everyone has that skill, it's that not everyone exercises, you know.
I did feel quite strongly when I met Shereen and was seeing some of what she was going through, that she was in a situation of, you know, she was in a limited phase, and that was the only treatment that was really available, or that was the authority figure. She was from maybe a, you know, classed as a certain social and economic class, a certain ethnicity, and you know, how much does that play a role, and also being completely divorced or somewhat divorced through the treatment, through what is her deeper DNA, spiritual DNA, her ethnicity.
Speaking of Shereen, she was I believe she was a very spiritual person, like on a deeper level. And like I said, once you know, it's something on a physical gives you an emotional, a spiritual reaction, and you're being forced on it. You know, it's detrimental. You know, I literally just see it as that it's detrimental to, you know, your physical health as well as your spiritual health as well as your mental health, because like I said, everything in general should be based on freedom of choice, and there was no freedom of choice in terms of where she was coming from, you know. And alright, in a certain aspect it might have sustained her in a certain way in terms of helping her get to a level of thought where she could think, you know, her thoughts weren't separating as such, because I do remember at times where she literally couldn't string a sentence together because her thoughts were so scattered. But you know, when she did have that equilibrium, should I say, or close to an equilibrium, and she actually went into within herself and she maintained it within herself, it was actually a really good thing to observe and watch and to be part of, you know. And yeah, it's just, you know, like I said, in this society in general, it's very, very good at telling you what you ain't instead of telling you what you are, you know. And, you know, to have some people every day telling you that you're not right in your head, you're this, you're that, you can't accomplish, you can't do that, and you're talking to a dreamer, especially a big dreamer, You know, I found that she found her peace through meditation, through creative self-expression. She used to do a lot of like writings, a lot of drawing, singing, you know, a lot of and that's where she found her peace, around me anyway. You know, when we first met, I used to bring her around the studio all the time, and then there was no pen pad writing. She would just go in there and be free, and that's one of the times when I saw her at her happiest, you know. And I think, like I said, one thing that needs to be done in terms is I believe everyone needs to tap into their creative self-expression. It's one of the easiest forms of spirituality that I know.